Hi, I'm Dana, and today I'm posting a video that's a little bit outside of my comfort zone, I won't lie. And that's because I really want to review the Luna menstrual cup I recently bought. Obviously, it's a menstrual cup, so I'm going to be talking about periods and blood and vaginas and all that kind of thing. So if you don't want to hear about that, this ain't the video for you. And I'm also going to be keeping it all gender neutral language because men and non-binary people and gender fluid people and so on and so forth all also can have periods. So I want it to just be open to anyone who has a period. So if you've got an issue with that, you can also just leave. Okay, so now that they're gone, let's just get into it. I've been looking for a reusable period product for quite a while, and obviously menstrual cups and reusable pads have also been around for quite a while, but I'm autistic, so I was kind of terrified. I don't like changing my routine, and having a period already feels like a huge change in my routine every single month that drives me a little bit up the wall and overwhelms me quite often and isn't often a very good experience. So I really needed to find something. I've always had fairly light, pain-free periods. They can get a little heavy, but they were always pain-free. Up until about 4 years ago, when every time I put a tampon in, I suddenly got horrific cramps. And I didn't connect it for the longest time, so I just carried on using tampons. I was like, oh my god, period cramps hurt so much. I didn't know they could just suddenly appear like this. And then there was a month that I couldn't afford tampons, so I had to use pads. And suddenly I didn't have any cramps. So I was like, shit. The tampons are causing them. So I switched to pads, but pads just make me very uncomfortable. I just don't enjoy them. Like, to everyone their own, but I just really do not enjoy wearing pads. So I needed something else, and this was, I think, my best option. As well as just generally not having a good time using normal pads and tampons, it does make you start to think, like, with all the climate stuff going on and all of that, am I really doing the right thing by using all this plastic and all this paper and all this cardboard and all this cotton and whatever else is in pads and tampons? And I was like, nah, I definitely want a reusable product. And then when you look at like the bleaching process for pads and tampons and all that kind of stuff, it gives me the heaves now. But I didn't know all that stuff, so I just used them for way too long until I finally bought this. I bought the Luna cup in a size A from Superdrug for $14.99, which is so cheap. Like, it says on the back that the average person will have around 400 periods in their life and use around 11,000 period products. So when I think about how many period products I'd usually use and how much all of that costs, $14.99, and it's gonna last me for like a lot more than like 3 or 4 months, I'm impressed. The box was absolutely decent. Superdrug literally just threw it in an envelope and sent it to me, but the box doesn't matter, it's what's inside. So you get instructions with like little diagrams and how to put it in and get it out, a little bag to keep it in, and of course the menstrual cup. This kind of has a lot of fluff in it now because I've been waving it around a while, but I have cleaned it since my last period and I will clean it again before my next one, so it's fine, don't worry about it. Now, I was going into this with a lot of fear and anxiety and like, oh my god, what am I doing? I don't want to have to do this. I wish I just didn't have a period. And the initial experience was quite overwhelming. Like, just putting it in, I'm not even talking about getting out yet. You get very in touch with your lower regions in many ways, in many, many ways. It was initially kind of terrifying and gross and like, oh, but upon reflection, I feel like I'm more aware and in tune and just okay with my own body now and my period, and I feel like it's been a really good thing in that regard. However, I will say I have no idea how I'm supposed to know whether or not it's gonna leak. Like, it says in the instructions that you can put your finger up and like sort of feel around the rim, but like my muscles are sort of pressing it, so when this is weird, I'm sorry, but when it's inside me, it automatically feels like that because I've got like a big muscle here like pressing it in, on my pubic bone or something inside there. So I can't, when I'm touching it, I can't tell if it's just that it's being pressed down by my muscle or it's not open. And I don't know if that's just my body. I can't find any advice for it. So I really, really struggle to know if it's actually like formed a right seal. So every time I've worn it with a pad. And it's not as bad as like wearing a pad for my period because it's not having anything happen to it. I'm like changing a clean pad. but I'm still having to use pads because I have no idea whether or not I'm going to leak. And I think maybe I should give myself and the product more credit, because I only leaked like the first 2 times I used it. And then for the rest of my period, it was completely fine. I was just changing clean pad after clean pad. But I just don't understand how I'm supposed to know when it's sealed in there and when it's like catching the blood, you know? And when it is inside, I feel like I'm much more aware of it than I am with tampons. Like, you get told with tampons that you shouldn't be able to feel it. And I wouldn't say I can necessarily feel it, but I can tell that it's there, you know? Whereas with this, I would say that I can absolutely feel it. And not like we all had that time as a teenager where you didn't put your tampon in right because you didn't know what you were doing and it was like kind of painful. And it's not like that. It doesn't hurt and it's not necessarily uncomfortable, but I can just very much feel that it's there. And I also think that I have like a very low cervix because it doesn't sit very high up. So this bit sort of like pushes, like it's not quite outside of like the vaginal opening. It's just inside it. I can feel it like pressing against like the opening of my vagina, I suppose. But with it being this kind of stem, because obviously different menstrual cups have different stems from what I've seen, and I think if it was one of the round ones with the rings, it'd both be easier to get out, which I'll talk about in a minute. But it'd also mean that I could cut it down and not feel it. But since this only has the one little grippy bit, if I was to cut that off, I'd be screwed to get it out. So I just sort of feel it there all the time. And because I'm so used to being told if you can like feel a period product that it's not in right, I keep changing it when it's not really ready to be changed, and it makes you a little sensitive to keep pulling it in and out all the time, you feel me? Okay, on to the removal of it. It's not as bad as I was expecting. I've heard so many horror stories of people getting like cups stuck inside them and not being able to pull them out and not being able to get any sort of grip on them and all that kind of thing. And I had a few times when it was difficult to get it out, but I didn't have a moment where I was like, oh shit, I'm gonna have to like go to the hospital over this or something, you know? Like every single time that it was difficult, I was aware like, I'm gonna be able to get this out. It's just taking some time. The troubleshooting for removal problems is absolutely useless. Like I was reading this when I was like really struggling to get it out, and it's literally like, just relax and squat. Relax and squat. Just relax. And it's like, honey, I haven't relaxed since I was 12. Like, that's not helping me right now. And what they don't tell you to do, I don't know if this is good advice. I'm not giving it as advice, okay? I don't even care if it is good advice. I'm not giving this as advice. It's just what I did. But I found that squatting and pushing almost like you're giving birth while also pulling really helps. However, this is where we really get into a review of this menstrual cup in particular, and not like all menstrual cups. I hate this stem. Okay, I had times where literally I looked down and like the stem was like this coming out of me and the cup was not shifting. And I was so scared that I was going to pull this off and have to like get my whole ass hand up in there to grab onto like the rim, the textured bits up here. Like I was terrified of that. It's not coming off at all. It was kind of a silly thing to be scared of. But this little, okay, it's got like, I don't know how well you can see it. I'm not sure why I'm just showing you my menstrual cup. But it's got like a little flower on the stem that's like the grip for it essentially. And once you're having to pull at it, that pretty much just disappears into the stem and you can't really get any grip. It's kind of useless. Other than that though, removal was like fairly straightforward and smooth going for me. I did have a few times that I spilt it, which is an experience, but that was entirely my fault and not the product. It's a case of getting used to the way that you sort of pull it down and out and then stick it back up to not spill everywhere. It's a learning curve, but it's one that I caught onto really quick, and like if I can catch onto it, you can. And I will say that I don't think it's as gross just seeing the blood in the cup as it is with a tampon. And like, I don't want to imply that period blood's gross anyway, because it's natural, it's your period, and it's whatever. You know, it doesn't fucking matter, does it? It's just a natural part of life. But that being said, when I have like blood on a pad or a tampon, it does give me the heebies. It looks like so much blood, doesn't it? And it overwhelms me. It's really not something I enjoy. I don't like being on my period. I don't like seeing the blood. So I thought having to like physically have a cup of blood and pour it away was going to be really fucking grim for me. And honestly, I didn't really mind it. Like the first few times I was like, oh, this is an experience. And then you just sort of get used to like, yep, I take my little cup of blood out and I pour it down the sink and I give everything a rinse and I'll put it back in. And it's just a bit of period blood after a bit. Like it really just stops phasing you. Or at least it did me. And it's not as messy as I thought it would be either. Because I think we're used to blood sort of being everywhere when you're using pads and tampons because it's just absorbing it. So it's sort of like, it's still inside you and everything, you feel me? So I thought I was going to be pulling this out and it'd be like covered in blood. But it's very much just on the inside because you've got the seal. So it feels like even though it's more in front of you, there's almost less contact with the blood. And that's really nice for me. That made my period a lot easier. You can still get toxic shock syndrome while you're using a menstrual cup, which I thought was not the case, but I was wrong. And that's like, as someone with anxiety, that's something that I've always worried about while using tampons. But it doesn't worry me as much with a menstrual cup. Like I'm still aware of it and I'm still careful and blah, 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 like we all should be. But I think because it's reusable, I don't worry about it as much because I'm aware that some of this is my like situation financially and all that boring stuff. But sometimes it's like, okay, I've got 4 tampons left and I've got 2 days for my period. How are we like rationing this out hour-wise? And there's no concern with this. So where I might have a tampon in for like the full length of time that I can before removing it, I don't think twice about being like, oh, I'm going to the toilet anyway, I'll just pop this out, sort it out. So I don't wear it for as long as I do other period products because it's easier, it's reusable, it's there all the time. I'm not as concerned, I suppose. Like, not being as worried has made me less worried. All in all, I really like the shape and the length of the cup as well. Like I say, I have looked around and I've been aware of menstrual cups for a really long time now. But yeah, some of them just look really wide or really long. And I was concerned about how big it was gonna be. But this is a really nice size. Like even having like, I think I have a low cervix. Even with that, it just didn't feel like an issue. And like I say, that does cause minor irritation to me sometimes because it's not quite in high enough on a couple of days on my period, which is why I think I have a low cervix. But the length of the cup's really good. So yeah, it's kind of a case of like, I love the actual cup, I just would prefer a different stem. For the packaging, like it's all pink and purple. I don't love that, I'll be honest with you. I do personally prefer the menstrual cups that are either transparent or just like a very grey kind of colour. I don't see the need for it to be pink and purple. And honestly, I think it'd probably make them more expensive, but I wish more places like let you have an array of colours to choose from, even though that's not important at all. But I do just wish they'd gone with a more sort of neutral colour scheme going on. So I do definitely have my pros and cons with it. But overall, I'm really glad that I made a switch to a product like this. I do think it's probably better health-wise than using tampons. I haven't been getting horrendous cramps while using my menstrual cup like I was with tampons. It's better for the environment. And I just think it's a lot easier and it makes it, having like a permanent product there makes it feel more like a part of my routine, which makes it kind of a little bit easier to have my period. I think once I've like really gotten to grips with this, I might like to try a different brand of cup just for like the stem and just to see what's available, I suppose, and what's most comfortable for me. But for now, I'm definitely happy with this. It's what I'm going to be using. And even though it does have its pros and cons and it has its learning curve, I don't see myself going back to normal pads and tampons anytime soon. Using this just felt like my period had less of an impact on my life, you know? It felt like I could still do everything I normally want to do. It felt like I was free to wear the things I actually want to wear instead of having to wear black pants on my period or something. And like I say, it just made it feel a lot more like it was part of my routine. It made it a lot more comfortable for me, both physically and like emotionally and mentally. It's a hard one to describe and I don't want to go too in depth on like my autism in a video that's just a review of a menstrual cup. But I am going to make a video about like periods and autism soon. So if you're an autistic person that has periods, you might want to stick around for that one. I don't know. But for now, my final thoughts are that I don't think you can go wrong with a menstrual cup, honestly. Like, I think there's definitely going to be ones that are better suited to me than this one is. But I still really like it and I'm still really glad to have gotten it and made the switch. And I would definitely recommend it to anyone that's considering it. Although, as I've said a few times now, it does have its pros and cons. I would totally recommend the Luna Cup. It's one of the cheapest on the market, which is hugely appealing to people like me that don't have an awful lot of money. And it does the job, you know, it does the job. It fits where it needs to. That was a weird thing to say. But yeah, it's got cons, but it doesn't have issues, is how I would put it. It's got downsides for me, but none of them like make it unusable, none of them make it overly uncomfortable. It's a good product. And I think I've said everything I intended to say. So that's my menstrual cup review for you. That's a little discussion of like my first experience using a menstrual cup, what it was like, how I enjoyed it, how the cup I used was. I don't have anything more to say now. So whoever you are, wherever you are, I hope you're having like a good little day, morning, evening, afternoon, whatever time you're in. I hope it's a good one. And I'll see you again in a few days.